This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Wednesday, April 18th, 2018. My guest is Dennis Bournique. How are you, Dennis?
I'm great. How are you, Miriam?
I'm superb. Dennis is the publisher of Prepaid Phone News. And you might not know this site, but if you are a prepaid customer or you want to know everything that's happening in the world of prepaid, Dennis is the guy. And Dennis, you've been doing this for a long time, haven't you?
I have. I can't remember quite when I started the site. I think it was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, but you were doing stuff before that. We met over a decade ago, I think, at this point now.
Right. I think it was 2000. I mean, we met when the N95 came out.
That's right. So 2007, 6 is when the, late 2006 is when the N95 launched. So we probably met around iPhone year, 2007.
Yes.
Because we both live in San Francisco and we both would attend a lot of press events together, local ones anyway.
Right.
And I've always loved your insight on all things, prepaid, because you have a really different perspective. You're dealing with low-end phones, you're dealing with high-end phones used on non-postpaid accounts, which is not very common in the US, but happens. And because of that, there's a bunch of interesting news that I think we want to probably talk about. I want to kind of start with kind of the elephant in the room. I don't think it's, just so the podcast topics I sent you are not going to happen in order necessarily. I did want to talk about ZTE. And as you know, ZTE is in hot water right now with the US government because they broke some rules, and that's probably not a good thing. But at the same time, the verdict from this is that they are not allowed to use, basically, U.S. companies are not allowed to export their technology to ZTE for the next 7 years, meaning that ZTE cannot no longer use Qualcomm processors for 7 years. They can no longer use U.S.-based software for 7 years, meaning Google services and Google Android, technically. So it's going to make their lives very different in the U.S. But more importantly, I don't think it's going to stop them from using Android abroad because Android is open source. But yeah, that's a huge deal for them. I mean, they just launched the ZTE Axon M in the winter fall in the US on AT&T, which is it was a bit delayed in terms of its launch, but is pretty much a flagship device at the time, close to a flagship, and had dual screen and some really interesting technologies. So ZTE is also very strongly present in the prepaid world. So what's your take? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think this means?
Well, I think if the sanctions stand, and it sounds like they probably will, I think ZTE, as I say it, will be pretty much dead in most of the West. Especially if they lose their Google Mobile Services license and they have to do a forked version of Android. I mean, that's not going to sell well outside of China. And
no.
So I think they're in a world of hurt. I did see a story on RCR today that speculates that they are working on a deal to be able to avoid those sanctions that would possibly involve them paying up to $1 billion fine and being subject to U.S. government oversight somehow of some sort. But I don't know if that'll happen. But they do have a big place in prepaid. They have a series they call the Blade series. It's got a bunch of different names like Blade Max and all the carrier prepaid sets. Metro PCS, Cricket, and Boost, they all have a variant of that Blade, which is, I've been told by Boost dealers at least, that it's one of their top sellers, right along with the Samsung J7. So those are going to go away, and I imagine somebody else will come in to fill their place. Alcatel is pretty active with the carrier prepaids. CoolPad is dipping its toes in those waters. So I think ZTE is probably dead to us going forward, but I don't think it's going to really change the low-end headset space that much because there are other players.
Yeah, but it's still disappointing. I mean, I reviewed the ZTE Blade V8 Pro last year for Chip Chick, and it was a pretty decent phone, honestly. I just felt like, I'm not like it was very competitive in the $200 price point, basically. And I just like the idea that we have competition. You're right, there is Alcatel, and they've promised a bunch of new phones that are mid-range and possibly even low end. There's other players. Moto is a big player in that space. Who else is there right now? You mentioned a few others.
Yeah, there's Coolpad.
Coolpad.
Yeah, Xiaomi is, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but they're talking about entering the US market someday.
They've been saying that for years, though.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how soon that's going to happen at this point.
Right. Yeah, I think Moto is certainly in there in a big way.
For sure. And then the other thing is, you've heard of Blue, right? They've had their own issues, right? They've had some kind of spyware scandal at some point recently. Wasn't there something like that?
Yes, definitely. There was a it wasn't, I don't know that you could really call it spyware, but it was definitely something unwanted in terms of a tracking service that was reporting all kinds of things. I think, phone numbers called and text messages and stuff like that back home to some third-party server in China. So
I don't know why they keep doing that. I mean, it's like, I kind of do, but I don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like they want to sell the data. And it's not just China, right? I think there's other companies that do this. I mean, obviously, the whole Facebook scandal right now with them, maybe not purposely, but definitely kind of selling your data in a way without your permission, in a way that wasn't really a part of the rules that you agreed to. So I just feel like, why do these companies do that? I mean, it's like, why don't you provide the best technology you can for the price, and be competitive on that level, right? I mean, that's a very good angle, right? To cell phones is, Xiaomi, as you mentioned, makes a good case for that. They sell really high-end devices at really great prices. They're not in the US yet, but it's only a matter of time. OnePlus is an example of a company that does the same. I just feel like these companies shouldn't really be compromising by putting, logging things on your phone like that. But that's just me.
Yeah, I agree that it's definitely not the way to go if you want to gain market share and customers and loyalty. In Blue's case, I think they are more of an aggregator that sources phones from a lot of different suppliers in China, and in a lot of cases makes fewer little modifications. So it's kind of a supply chain issue where some no-name manufacturer in China came up with these phones and they put the spyware on it, and Blue didn't do any due diligence or didn't do enough due diligence to find it and root it out. But yeah, that definitely hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought fondly of them. Like, I never actually tried their devices, sadly. They I did reach out to them back in the days when they were kind of a new player, and I was like, hey, look, a phone company based in Florida. Well, obviously they're Chinese phones, but the company has a strong presence in the US and is trying to really break into the US market. But it just never happened, and so I've always kind of stayed positive. I like the idea of choices for customers, especially people who are on a budget and don't want necessarily to spend, the kind of money you need to spend even for a OnePlus phone to have a good experience. And so I kept an eye on them, and then, I found this out, and I'm like, seriously, like, come on, like, it's so disappointing. That's kind of where I went, okay, I'm just going to go buy a Moto E4, for $80 on Verizon and call it a day.
Right.
Because, at least none of that's going to happen.
That's right.
So, yeah. So you think ZTE might recover, might work out a deal?
Maybe.
$1 billion is a lot of money.
It is.
They do have a lot of money. They're a very large company. People don't realize that. So speaking of, kind of segueing into Huawei, since ZTE is, a Chinese company like Huawei and has some Chinese government connections like Huawei, and also makes networking equipment like Huawei and makes flagship phones like Huawei. I just kind of want to, it's a little old now, but it kind of comes back to the forefront, I think, is because of the P20, P20 Pro that recently launched, which are phenomenal phones. It comes back to the forefront, this whole Huawei carrier cancellation deal at CES. What was your thought at the time, and what do you think about it now, and how do you think it's going to affect the landscape in the US in general, and maybe also the prepaid landscape?
Well, in general, I think it's that Huawei is getting a raw deal. ZTE, they obviously they did something wrong. They got caught, and then they tried to cover that up and didn't follow through on the on what they were supposed to do. So yeah, I can see that. I can see them getting punished. What has Huawei done? I mean, it seems like it's all speculation, and their CEO is a ex-army man, so therefore the Chinese government is going to be putting backdoors in all their phones. Well, where are the back doors? The NSA is supposed to be really smart about that sort of stuff.
To me, it's like, if these intelligence agencies have some evidence of this, they need to tell the public.
Exactly.
First of all, it's their duty to, because they need to protect us, right?
Right.
Secondly, it would be way more fair to Huawei. Then they can defend themselves, maybe go to court, maybe work something out. I'd be very disappointed. I've been using their products extensively for the last 3 years, and I love them. But I feel we need to know, and I actually don't believe there's anything going on, at least not on the handset level. I can understand the fear potentially of using ZTE and Huawei networking equipment in the US, because, base stations, that stuff is infrastructure, right?
Right.
It's kind of mission critical in situations of crises.
Right.
And crises that, can be created by, political outside influence and then manipulated using technology, right? Sure. We know that very well. I just think that the handsets, though, is crazy. I mean, today, the top 3 manufacturers in the world in terms of, you can look at it from both profit, number of sales, and generally mind share are, in terms of making the most high-tech phones are Apple, Samsung, and Huawei. And Huawei is just completely erased from the equation in North America. And most of, I would say Canada is kind of like following in the footsteps of the US. To some extent, I think that as a Canadian, I can say this, I think that they often do that policy-wise. Lately, a bit less, thankfully. But I feel that it's going to impact them as well there, even though they technically continue selling phones in Canada, and they will. But they can't sell phones here. I mean, carriers are really the only way they're going to get in. And, this deal with AT&T and Verizon was going to be potentially the beginning of that for them. Them selling phones unlocked on Amazon, Best Buy, or anywhere else is not, we all know that's a niche market. I mean, OnePlus, as much as I love them, is a niche player because of that. And, in fact, Best Buy's booted Huawei out of the equation as well. So, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How prevalent was Huawei ever in the prepaid space?
Not terribly prevalent. A long time ago, they had a really low-end Boost Huawei handset. And then last year, they came out with a GSM handset that Cricket and AT&T Prepaid were selling. It's a pretty decent handset.
What was it?
Yeah, it was called the Huawei Elite on Cricket, or the Huawei Ascend XT on AT&T Prepaid.
Oh, it was an Ascend phone. Okay.
Yeah, and the subsidized price was around $80, $65 to $80, and it had a 5.5-inch HD screen. It had I believe a Snapdragon 615 and 2 gigs of RAM. And supposedly it had a better camera, though I don't have any personal experience with this. It had a better camera than, comparable things like the ZTE phones or the Moto E4.
Right.
So it was a popular phone. It's still available. I'm sure the supplies are running out. Yeah. It's still available from Walmart and Best Buy, I think, but not directly from the carriers anymore.
Interesting. But ZTE had a stronger presence in the US, correct, for prepaid?
Yeah, certainly in terms of number of models. I don't know about market share, but yeah.
I know that they definitely Cricket had a lot of ZTE phones for a long time, right?
Yes, yeah, and Boosted too. Metro has pretty much all of them except Verizon Prepaid.
Cool. So I mean, it's to me, it's really just a sad story. I just want to see more phones, more options for customers. You know, the people who listen to this podcast, kind of like you, Dennis, are, you know, early adopters, tech savvy folk. They will buy their own phones unlocked. They will go prepaid if they have to or want to, or feel like it's the right choice for them. Without hesitation, they do not rely on just walking into a carrier store and buying their phone on a family plan. Although some of them do, because they do have a great family plan or a business plan. And I respect that. I just feel that I think the audience here is interested in variety and choice. And, you know, obviously we're all a little frazzled by the fact that this choice is dwindling. You're going to say, well, we have a lot of options still, right? You can still buy the phone's gray market. If you want to buy a Huawei P20 Pro right now, you can buy one online legitimately through an importer. They're still not, you know, they're not banned from being imported yet, as far as I know. But you're not going to get warranty support and all that stuff, right? You might get it through the reseller, perhaps, but it's going to be a real hassle sending your phone back to them to deal with warranty work, you know, etc.
Sure.
So it's a big gamble, and you know, when you can go buy a OnePlus phone with warranty, it's kind of a hard sell. You know, when you can buy a Galaxy S9 Plus with warranty unlocked from Amazon or Best Buy, or even from a carrier store. Although I don't think the carriers sell the unlocked versions, at least not without their branding and crapware on them. So you probably don't want to do that. I just say in general, avoid going to a carrier store to buy a phone, even for prepaid. Just avoid it. Just bring your phone unlocked. Pick your operator, and in the prepaid space, there's a lot of prepaid operators and virtual network operators, right? That are online only, right? At this point.
Yeah, it's the prepaid world is moving more and more online. There are a lot of MVNOs, and although I think they're hurting a lot of them, what's happened is that the carriers have, in the last 3 years, gotten really interested in prepaid. And if you want a prepaid plan with so-called unlimited data, which obviously has deprioritization limits of around 30 gigs or less,
Right.
The only place to get one is pretty much Cricket, Metro PCS, or Boost. The MVNOs, I don't think the carriers will sell them unlimited data. They'll sell them data at a price,
Right.
per gig price. So they're really caught between a rock and a hard place there and trying to offer unlimited. So they're left to fight over the scraps, you know, the $30 and under market. So I think they're getting squeezed. There haven't been a lot of business failures lately, but I wouldn't be surprised if this year sees some. But there's still a lot of choices, and going online obviously makes a lot of sense. You've got Republic and Ting and are exclusively online, and Red Pocket Mobile is increasingly online. So yeah.
I've received a bunch of SIMs from some of these virtual online network operators that I need to try out for myself. Unfortunately, I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to stick those SIMs in my phones and take them for a spin. But I'm very curious as to what would work for me. I have 2 lines on AT&T that are costing me a fortune that I just use for basically testing devices. They're postpaid, and they're unlimited data, which is nice because they're grandfathered, but it's still too expensive. And I really don't need unlimited data on these for testing purposes. So what I'm trying to find, because I'm a T-Mobile customer primarily as my main number, and I'm very happy with their service and their pricing and their data roaming policies and features. And, coverage can be better in some places. I have to admit that it's still not the greatest. It's gotten much better over the years. But I'm very happy. So I like to have, because I test mostly unlocked and GSM based phones, I like to have an AT&T SIM or 2 floating around. And so I'm looking for kind of an AT&T based virtual network operator to replace these two lines. And I'm fine with the data cap. So I'm exploring all these different SIMs and and constantly reading your website to kind of see what the best deals are.
Yeah, I like Red Pocket right now. They seem to have excellent pricing, and I've been getting good feedback from users that their customer support is, decent for prepaid, which isn't saying much, but it's better than most. And that their data doesn't seem to be as slow as some of the other MVNOs that are probably more heavily deprioritized. So yeah, that would be my top pick right now if I was looking for a new prepaid carrier that's AT&T based. They actually offer AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon, but I think they're strongest with AT&T.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. Probably not, but I would say take Dennis's advice. I think the feeling I get, Dennis, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if you're a prepaid customer, you really have to be ready to jump ship and port your number because they come and go, right? Some of them shut down. They also don't always, the best deals that they have might not last because they don't get the contracts renewed with their, kind of master carrier operator. Is that correct? Would you say that's true? It's
very true. There have been at least a half a dozen prepaid companies that went out of business over the last maybe three years. So yeah, you do risk that chance. You do have that chance, that risk. And, like you say, the deals come and they go. And so having a Google Voice number that you can forward to anything is a great advantage. And being able to jump, having a phone like most of the newer Motos that works on all four carriers is definitely a good thing to have if you're a hardcore prepaid user.
I mean, that's not something you get very commonly with Chinese companies, right? I mean, obviously Lenovo owns Moto and Lenovo is a Chinese company, but Lenovo has a legacy of making phones in the US that are, basically dual system phones, right? Is probably the best way to put it, which is pretty much the only place in the world where this matters anymore. But for prepaid, this really does matter a lot, especially if you want to be on the Sprint network in some way or another, correct?
Correct, or Verizon.
Yeah, Verizon should be easier though. It's just by inserting the SIM from the operator. I think Sprint, don't you have to go to their website and register or something with Boost and what's the other one? Virgin's gone, right?
No, Virgin is still around. We keep predicting that it's going to go, but it's still there. You can walk into Target or Best Buy and buy a new Virgin phone and set it up. And they also have this online only thing that's iPhones only.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, Virgin's still around, but you're right about Sprint. It's a pain to activate a phone or to switch phones on Sprint. Their systems are, I guess, so archaic and load it with legacy patches.
You're the only ones left that you can't just put a SIM in your phone.
Right.
Verizon still. If you have a phone that supports Verizon outright, if you were a Verizon customer and you put a SIM, it would just work. Any Verizon virtual mobile operator, if you get a SIM from them, I don't think you have. Once the SIM is active, I don't think you have to do anything online, right?
Right. Although Verizon will, if they don't like the phone you're using, they will cut you off.
Oh, wow. But wait, how is that possible? Since part of their LTE license is that they have to allow access to any terminal that supports that band.
Well, funny thing, since the new administration took over, they've been locking their own prepaid phones, and they've been...
Oh, that's right. They changed their policies recently.
Yeah, they definitely, they're not, that agreement, that Band 13 agreement, they're definitely not living up to it.
The FCC is definitely in the pocket of the regime right now, so I can see how they can get away with that. I don't know, somebody maybe should do a class action suit on that because that's one of our fundamental rights. Remember, folks, in the US, the people own the airwaves, right?
Yeah.
The FCC's job is to license these airwaves owned by the people to these companies and basically through auctions. And there are terms associated with these auctions. And when Verizon won Band 13, which is their LTE band, 700 megahertz, the stipulation was that they had to allow any device that's compatible to be on their network. And and they couldn't like lock them down. And there was a bunch of other things that, practically speaking, don't matter to most people because you get the phone from the operator. But to some of us, does matter. And it looks like Verizon's not playing by the rules.
Well, specifically, what they're doing is they sell prepaid phones at a subsidized price, and if you put a Verizon postpaid SIM in one of those phones, the SIM will be, what do they call it, redlined or something like that. Well, basically, they'll shut your service off until you call them and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I put it in this prepaid phone. I'm going to put it back in an authorized phone," and then they'll restore your service. So that's the main thing they're doing, and it's affecting MVNOs too. If you take one of their branded prepaid phones and take it to TracFone, put the SIM in, it'll work for a few days, and then it'll get shut down.
Crazy. Speaking of odd kind of prepaid-ish, like even cheaper than prepaid, I want to talk about the Samsung Galaxy J2 Pro, a phone with no cellular or Wi-Fi connectivity, sold in Korea. So you want cheaper than prepaid? This is zero paid.
Yeah.
Because, technically it does make phone calls, so I suppose it's not completely zero paid. You still would basically, this is a phone that you would use with a voice-only plan, which is interesting. Of course, this phone is in Korea only. It's totally a cheap entry-level, fringe case scenario. Maybe it makes sense in that market. The biggest thing here is the idea is that this is a phone for kids and maybe teenagers, school children. You give it to them, they can't get online, so they can't play games or whatever. Theoretically, they can sideload. Obviously, if they know how to do that. They can maybe connect over Bluetooth tethering. If this thing has Bluetooth, they can maybe plug a Ethernet dongle into it if it supports it via USB on the go, assuming it doesn't have USB-C on it. And then you can probably connect just because Android supports that. But the reality is not. This is kind of an interesting thing. What's your take on that phone? I mean, does it make any sense to you? My biggest concern is how can you update this phone? I mean, not that Samsung is good at updating phones, but like this one will never get an update, right?
Right. I don't see how it could unless maybe tethered update, through a PC
USB to a
program.
PC, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. I mean, maybe there's a market. I think it's probably just one of those marketing ideas they're throwing against the wall to see if it flies. But yeah, I mean, if you want that, you can use any phone and tell your carrier to shut off your data. Of course, I guess that doesn't shut off Wi-Fi.
You can turn the Wi-Fi toggle off.
Yeah, you can, but your kids can turn it back on.
Maybe you can change that somehow, like root it and remove some of the settings or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't think, even as I'm not a parent, clearly. You're going to tell, because I was going to say, if I was a parent, I still think I would turn that off. I want to trust my kids to learn to do the right thing.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's my approach. I grew up in Europe, where I was pretty much allowed to do anything. The liquor cabinet was always unlocked, but I just knew better, right? Like, it's just like why would I do that? That's not something you do. You drink when there's a special occasion. You don't drink just, Anyway, it's a cultural thing, I think. But clearly in Korea, they think there's a market for, I don't know. It's weird.
It is very weird. The strangest thing in that story I saw was, if you buy this phone, if you're a student, I guess this is probably high school students, and you take some kind of college entrance exam, use it, and you have this phone so you can't cheat. If you complete the exam, you can return the J2 and get some kind of a Galaxy S. It's kind of unspecified Galaxy S.
So that's interesting. So that looks like it's very specific to Korea, to like their school system almost then.
Yeah.
Wow. That's probably why it doesn't make sense to us.
It doesn't, yeah. It's kind of like, remember back 10, 12 years ago when a lot of workplaces said you couldn't bring a camera phone into the job?
Yeah, I remember that.
And there were some special cameraless versions of
exactly.
popular phones.
Oh, I have a story for you. I have an anecdote. So I was in, I want to say Virginia Beach, some place on the East Coast in Virginia that is a coastal military town. Does Virginia Beach sound right?
It might be. I
Newport
don't know
Beach?
Virginia. I don't think I've ever been in the state.
Anyway, maybe it's Newport Beach. Anyway, I was in a place out there where there's a strong Navy military presence, and I was visiting some relatives of my spouse's at the time. And we were at Best Buy, my spouse and I, getting a laptop for those relatives. And up comes a guy, like we're in line waiting to pay for this thing. And this guy comes up to us, and he looks, like a big burly military dude. And like, he's not in uniform or anything, but I wasn't quite sure, like, is this guy going to, beat us up because we're gay? Or is he going to like he's looking threatening to me, and I'm kind of like prepared for something. And then he comes up to me, he goes, "Hey, are you Miriam of Engadget?" At the time I was Engadget. And I was like, "Yes, I am." He goes, "I'm your biggest fan." And we start talking about phones. I mean, that was kind of awesome. But then the best part was, he pulls out this BlackBerry, and he says, like, "I'm stuck with this," and I'm like, "Oh, well, it's not too bad. This is like, at the time, this is 2008 or 9. BlackBerries were still a thing then." I'm like, "It's not too bad. It's like a Bold 9900 or something." I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." He's like, "Yeah, but there's no camera. Look," and he shows it to me. I'm like, "What?" Like, I'd never seen that. Like, I'd never seen one of those BlackBerry without a camera. He goes, "Yeah, I work for the military. I'm a contractor. I'm not allowed to have a camera on premises. So that's the only phone I can use."
Yeah.
I was like, wow. So that wasn't a thing that long ago. I mean, we're talking 2009, 2008, 2009, around that. So like 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
It is crazy. I mean, back when I worked in the financial industry, they were really concerned if anybody turned on a hotspot on their phone. They actually had some kind of a sniffer on a cart that they'd roll around through the cubicles to detect rogue Wi-Fi.
Wow. Oh, well, things have changed a lot with the bring your own device to work thing now.
Yeah, they sure have.
But related to phones that don't necessarily need data, I mentioned on last week's podcast that there was this one phone, and I couldn't remember the name, and I couldn't Google it in time for the end of the podcast. So it's this is a correction really for my readers, listeners. I was talking about a phone that is a second version of a phone designed for basically disconnecting from the internet for the weekend kind of thing, or for the evening, called the Light Phone. So the original Light Phone was just a T9 based. It was very cosmetically appealing phone with just, voice and text, T9 keypad. And they just recently in the fall, and I talked about this on a previous podcast, they launched a new one called the Light Phone 2. And what's cool about it, Dennis, is that this one has what is it called? E-paper display. Mm-hmm. It's a touchscreen e-paper instead of a T9. So you actually have a QWERTY keyboard on screen. So if you want to text, it's not as painful as the other one. But it's the same as the Light Phone original. There's no data connectivity. There's no apps. There's no social media. It's just phone calls, texts, and a very sleek, sexy package, now with an e-paper QWERTY keyboard display. That's perfect for prepaid, right?
It could be, yeah. Although it looks like it's pretty pricey. I saw.
It's expensive, right? Like, because that's the idea, is that it's like it's fancy and thin and light and great battery life, and it's basically like, it's kind of like yoga. It's good if you can afford it.
Yes.
But most people can't.
Yes.
And the people who practice it are a little bit overzealous at selling the idea to others and not understanding that others cannot necessarily afford it. Right?
Yeah, that's true. It's an interesting story.
I'm basing this on my experience of yoga in San Francisco, which I see everything in San Francisco is more expensive. But like, I'm all for it. I'm just like, why does it have to be so? If it's so good for you and it's practiced by people in India, anywhere, anytime, why is it so expensive that you have to go to a yoga studio and be taught by a yogi?
Well,
so why is it so expensive? You have to buy a Light Phone 2. Why not just buy a Nokia 3310 or 8110,
yeah,
which is, the new banana phone that launched at MWC at that point. I mean, I suppose that it's better to have a QWERTY keyboard and e-paper, e-ink than to have a T9 if you're not good at T9, which is what Nokia would give you. But at least for the original Light Phone, I don't see the appeal. I would rather buy that new HMD Nokia 3310 or 8110.
Sure.
If you want to be stylish, especially with the funky colors and stuff and the nostalgia factor, and the 8110 can be turned into a hotspot because it's 4G LTE. So, woohoo.
Yeah.
But
It's,
anyway,
it's kind of a weird thing. Those light phones, they kind of remind me of what a feature phone would look like if Apple made a feature phone.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Anyway, I just wanted to tell everybody this is the phone I was thinking of when me and Judy were talking. And I think it's relevant to potentially to prepaid, because if you have that kind of money and you're willing to, like, you want to disconnect for the weekend or the evening or whatever, and you want to take something light and thin with you that's really stylish, that still makes you look, on point when you're out and about at the opera or whatever, but you don't want to be disturbed by notifications. I think this light phone too, if is cool because, again, touchscreen. I just don't understand why you can't have the discipline of get a very sexy, thin, simpler than flagship Android phone and turn off all of the apps and data stuff on it and use that as your weekend phone instead.
Right.
Weird. We talked about Huawei earlier, and I want to running down the topics here. You've heard the rumors that Samsung's building a Galaxy 10 or Galaxy X, which would be one of the first folding phones with a folding display, I would say, because folding phones, obviously, flip phones have been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sure if the Samsung phone is going to be a flip phone in the traditional sense of flipping along its length. Or if it's going to be like the ZTE Axon M, kind of more like a laptop clamshell design. But supposedly Samsung is working on a phone that might come out in 2019 has a foldable display on it. And the rumor is now that Huawei, of course, being one of the manufacturing and technology powerhouses in the field, is also working on a folding phone. What do you think of these folding phones?
Well, I kind of like the concept. I'm all for a bigger screen and a smaller form factor, which is one thing it would give you. And it seems like it would offer screen protection, too, when it's closed. You wouldn't have to worry about smashing your screen when you dropped it as much.
But how do you see notifications when your phone is on the table ringing or vibrating? That's a big challenge. You've seen that Gemini PDA phone, right? PDA/phone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it's recently reviewed by some of the big publications. I got to play with it at CS and MWC, and it's cool because it reminds me of the Scion Series 5, but it's, when it's closed, you get the notification light and the vibration, but you have no idea who's calling you until you open the thing up. So I just don't see, I think the idea of a folding display means that it's a small display when it's folded, so you can still see it and use it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can unfold it to have more surface area to do more serious tasks.
So it folds around the back instead of closing like
I'm thinking
clamshell.
that's kind of the idea that they're going for. At least to me, that would make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way as China has, and Samsung sells these phones as well, has flip phones, Android flip phones that have a display in the back of the flip and in front of the flip. And of course, when they're closed, you can still use them as a very small Android phone with a small, like 3.5-inch display. And it's touch capacitive, so you can do basic stuff on the front. And then if you really want to get serious, you open it up and, you use the T9 with the Chinese or Korean characters to type out something really fast, because apparently that's faster than using Western. If you speak Chinese or Korean, apparently or Japanese even, it's a lot faster using T9 on those than autocomplete Western characters.
Right.
Although we know that people have gotten really fast at using T9. Remember, there used to be competitions on that.
I do.
But basically, those flip phones have a screen on the inside as well. That's also, of course, capacitive. And so it's like two screens, basically. But they're not attached to each other in a way. So like you basically they're mirrors of each other. What Samsung's working on is obviously, I think, it could be a clamshell that closes and maybe has a tiny little OLED display in front that shows you the notifications or whatever. But I have a feeling that we're going to see something more like, where the phone feels in the same size as a kind of maybe smaller Android phone today when it's shut and still has a front being full display. And then when you open it, you unfold it, basically you get double the surface area, and it's seamless. You know?
Yeah, that sounds like one rumor I saw about the Galaxy S10 was that it would actually have 3 screens. There'd be 3.5-inch screens, I think was the story I saw. There'd be one on the exterior, and then it would be a clamshell, and you open it up, and there inside would be 2 joined 3.5-inch screens.
I see, and they would be the one that are joined and folding.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be pretty expensive, though, huh?
I would think so. Yeah, I think it would.
Oof.
Especially, I mean, imagine what people are saying is supposed to happen is that the seam between the 2 inside screens is not going to be visible or tactile. It's going to be actually folding glass or plastic or something.
Yeah.
That sounds like a real tour de force of technology there.
You know, speaking of odd form factors, we talked about this a little bit last week podcast. We talked about design with Judy from Gear Diary, and I found another story related to that, to all this weird form factor, and it was I just want to mention it because I'm going to put the link in the show notes. Nokia, it's a nostalgia phone story about the new Nokia phones, the 3310, and well, 3310 is a year old now, but the 8110, the banana phone, and the basically these 2 phones from Nokia that came out in the last year and a half, year and a month, I should say. It's a kind of feature story on Wired.com about these phones, kind of related to our conversation last month. Also related to prepaid because these phones are you're probably best going to thrive on prepaid carriers. And they're cool phones. You know, there is certainly something about the simplicity of just having a simple phone that doesn't do everything and disrupt you for everything. I would actually love to see, and I've said this a few times on the podcast, I'd love to see an Android phone that was not necessarily cheap, but optimized for lightness, battery life, weight. Still was, designed to be super premium, but it would let you scale down notifications and, kind of at the system level, and would maybe have some facilities where when you take, and the camera would be really high end, and when you take a photo with the camera, you'd be prompted and say, do you want to upload this to all your networks? And it automatically would do it properly for you. Basically, it's a one-stop shop. Like you don't have to spend the time to enter caption or whatever. You just have it with you, answer phone calls, reply to messages, maybe only have, your text messages and Facebook messages, and, maybe like say you use WhatsApp or WeChat or whatever it is you're messaging wise that you want to, or maybe your Gmail, and you can use that, you can reply. These are the only things that you deal with. And then you can upload photos all you want all the time. Maybe it uses Google Photos for it, where it uploads automatically like it does now with Google Photos, but it gives you this option to disseminate that specific photo you just took to, say Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Snapchat or whatever. And you don't have to worry about managing it and babying it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think that would be really nice for when you go on a road trip or you go to like fancy evening and you want to share something with the world, but disconnect to some extent. And, what would make you pick that phone with you rather than your big flagship is the compactness, the lightness, the battery life, and the fact that it still doesn't compromise. If you really need to get shit done, you have a phone that can still run everything and you can jump in. And you have, this really sexy thin thing by default. Yeah, I think that there's a market for that. I guess maybe I should say there's a market for just compact premium Android phones. But I would like to see some software features to kind of optimize that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I get people all the time asking, what's a really high end small Android phone, and there really isn't any. I mean, Sony has 1 or 2, and that's about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're all gotten pretty big. And I mean, honestly, they're not that big and thick and heavy. They're manageable. It's just, if you are purposely wanting to scale down a little bit and you don't necessarily need the screen real estate because you're not going to do a lot of messaging, it would be nice to shrink things down to an even thinner, lighter format and smaller format. And still let you do all the things you want to do in case you do, but kind of more focus on just maybe notifying you and on disseminating the content you create, which is really what our phones are used for the most, really, right? Unless you're using your phone for business, in which case, obviously you're spending a lot of time on it for all kinds of things. But anyway, we'll see. And to me, that's why the Lite Phone 2 is kind of a step in that direction, but not far enough. And like, the Sony compact phones, there's XZ2 Compact, for example, comes to mind, that was launched at MWC, is a step in the right direction coming from the other end, right?
Right.
But it's still not compact enough, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of Sony and phones and high-end premium phones, it's actually even called premium. Sony finally announced and launched the third salvo of their XZ2 line. They had the XZ2 Compact and the XZ2 regular, and now they have the XZ2 Premium. And what makes that phone special is that it has dual cameras in the back and one is 12 megapixel monochrome, and the other one is, I think, 20 megapixel color, using, of course, Sony's latest sensors. And it can do 5-digit ISO, so 10,000 something ISO, low light photography, which is remarkable. In fact, we got a demo of this at MWC. I know you weren't there, Dennis, but if you went to the MWC Sony booth, there, and amongst all the XZ2 compact and regular phones that you could try out, there was this little stand, I guess, where you could see a demo of what they were working on with dual cameras to bring the ISO to really high numbers and improve low light performance. And they hinted that this would appear on a future phone, and this is the phone. So, the P20, P20 Pro, particularly the P20 Pro, have been lauded for their low light performance prowess, and I think this is the first phone that might give them a run for the money or compete with them, because it's doing similar things. The Huawei P20 Pro also is capable of 5-digit ISO. So it's kind of interesting to me that, this is the new battle low light. It always has been somewhat, right? The
Right.
Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL we're kind of the low light champs. But honestly, I've been using the P20 Pro, primarily the P20 Pro, for the last few days. I finally got mine late last week. And wow, the low light on that phone is unbelievable. It really does blow away the Pixel. It blows away the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus. It is it's a new milestone for mobile photography in terms of low light. In every other way, it's a good camera, it's solid, but in daylight, you don't really notice too much of a difference. The optical zoom is nice because it's 3 times instead of 2 times on other phones, so it does give you more to play with, more ability to zoom in. But I'm impressed with the low light. What's your take on that? Have you played with any of these phones, or have you been following?
I've been following them, but I haven't gotten my hands on any of them. The best camera phone I have is my S7 Edge.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, but definitely low light performance is a barrier with most camera phones, and I'd love to see phones that did better in low light. So yeah, I like what Huawei and Sony are doing with this, and I'm glad you found that the P20 Pro was at such great performance in low light. So looks like we're moving there.
Yeah, I will have more for you folks on an upcoming podcast. I know you've been waiting for my thoughts on the P20 Pro. Here's what I can do for now is invite you to watch the latest episode of All About Android from the Twit Network. I was there yesterday in Petaluma. So if you look at the episode that was recorded on April 17th, on April 17th, 2018, where I'm the guest or co-host or whatever you want to call it, you'll get a lot of my. I basically have to do a little mini demo, mini review of the camera. So go there. But I want to talk about it in the podcast more. I'm hoping to get a phone photography expert on the show to discuss that more in detail, and kind of dedicate an entire show to it, because there's a lot to talk about. I'm very, very impressed. It's really a milestone phone in terms of imaging. as much as the Pixel 2 XL and Pixel 2 have been, as much as the Lumias, like the 1020 back in the day, and the 808 PureView, which wasn't a Lumia but was a Nokia phone back in the day. This is definitely a turning point in mobile photography. So I just want to put it out there. I'm very excited about it. It's been really good. I want to talk about how, in your opinion, what's the market, what's the landscape for prepaid flagships, using flagships on prepaid? Is that a thing? Do you think it's viable? Do you recommend it? Does it happen, etc.?
It definitely happens. I'm not sure. I mean, the readers of my blog tend to be the more sophisticated prepaid phone users, and they do talk a lot about using flagships. In many cases, older flagships. Like maybe a Nexus 6P or a Galaxy S7.
Right.
Or an iPhone.
Still perfectly usable. Yeah, still perfectly solid phones. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's the way to go. I mean, really, carrier phones are bad enough when you buy the flagships, and the prepaid carrier phones are, well, lots of bloatware, and they don't have much horsepower to start with. So that makes things all the worse. So I really think that bringing your own phone, preferably a high-end phone, even one that's 2 or 3 years old, is the way to go.
Definitely. Do you see a lot of people bringing like phones like the OnePlus, which, as we know, is very affordable for the performance?
I have heard at least one of my readers uses a OnePlus. Yeah, they definitely are people that use them.
On prepaid, huh?
Definitely. There have to be.
And is the fact that it's hard to find unlimited data a limiting, and the fact that a lot of those flagship phones don't necessarily have support for dual system, i.e. Sprint and Verizon, do you find that is a hindrance for people?
Unlimited data is available. It's available if you go with a carrier prepaid like AT&T prepaid,
or T-Mobile,
or Metro PCS or T-Mobile prepaid. So yeah, it's definitely available if you need. And T-Mobile will give you 50 gigs before they deprioritize.
Right.
AT&T, I think, is 22.
Cool. That's actually a lot. I mean,
yeah, it is.
I don't think. I mean, I use usually less than 10 gigs a month. I used to be steadily around the 2 to 3 gig mark for many years, but in the last few years, I have to say it's gone up. What was I going to say? I'm on unlimited everything with T-Mobile. Unlimited, like tethering everything, 2 lines on one account. It's really awesome. I was going to talk about really briefly something I saw in the news. And since we're speaking of the OnePlus 6 is coming imminently. I don't know exactly when. I'll let you know once I get a review unit. But the rumors are swirling stronger than ever, and more information is leaking. And the latest leak, I just want to mention, it's not in the show notes, Dennis, but it's that the OnePlus 6 will probably be OnePlus's first water-resistant smartphone. So that's exciting because so far none of their phones have been water resistant. And water resistance is a really nice thing. Once you have it, you kind of like wonder how you lived without it. Has that been your experience too? Have you had a water resistant phone?
I have. I think I have anyway. I believe my S7 is water resistant. It's a nice idea. I mean,
it is.
I mainly worry if I'm out in the rain. I do a lot of walking. In San Francisco, we had a lot of rain this year. So sometimes I get caught out in the rain and I have my phone. And if my phone's waterproof, I think nothing of pulling it out and using it in the rain. Whereas if it isn't waterproof, I say, well, I wonder if this is going to finally be the bit of water that that
gets in the headphone jack and screws everything up.
Right.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think that's actually very interesting. Like we talked about the P20 and P20 Pro. The P20 is only IP53, which is really splash resistant, so probably rain is okay. Whereas the P20 Pro is IP68, which, as we know, is you can submerge in a shallow bit of water for some time, like half an hour or something. I believe that only applies to like non-salty water. Like salt water is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Even for water-resistant phones, I try to avoid using your phone in the ocean, folks. It's just a bad idea. Pools are okay. Chlorine can be a little harder than normal water, of course, but pools are okay. In the tub, you're okay. Drop it in some liquid while you're doing the dishes is okay. Just avoid salt. I think a lot of people have this idea that, they're going to not have to worry about it at the beach. I think, you also have to worry about the sand scratching the glass. I mean, The reality is Gorilla Glass, especially 5, is very crack resistant. So like if you're worried about breaking the glass, it's very unlikely to happen. But the compromise is that to make it crack resistant, it is actually a little more scratch prone. So, I mean, it's still very scratch resistant compared to regular glass, but sand, I mean, is kind of insanely hard on glass. All you need is 1 grain of sand in your pocket and put your phone in there, and you might actually scratch Gorilla Glass 5. That's something to keep in mind. So, yes, you see these ads with people using their phones at the beach, but I would say, just use common sense, right?
Right.
One more thing we have. You remember how there was some talk last week of Xiaomi bringing in working on a gaming phone. Let me actually Google the name of it. It's like something black something. It's like Xiaomi gaming phone. Let's Google that because that's a piece of news I missed last week. It would be called the Black Shark from Xiaomi. Well, it's made by Xiaomi, but the brand is Black Shark. So it's a gaming phone, like kind of like the Razer phone, but made by Xiaomi, and that was announced last week. What's interesting is that now Asus is jumping on that bandwagon and saying that they're working on a, Republic of Gaming phone, I guess. Republic of Gaming is Asus's laptop gaming brand.
Right.
So gaming phones are, I guess, becoming a thing, which is very interesting.
It is.
There you go. Now you know. Boom. Yeah, so that's a piece of news that I wanted to bring up. What's your thoughts on that? Like, do you think there's a market for a gaming phone?
I'm not sure. I'm not a gamer, and I don't really know any gamers anymore. It seems like it might not be in the U.S. I don't know how. There is a gaming culture, obviously, in the U.S., but it seems to be mostly PC-based gaming. And I don't think it's nearly as big as, say, Korea, where they apparently are insane about gaming. And to a lesser extent, I think that's true in China, too. So I can see it being a thing in certain markets. And maybe maybe in the U.S. I mean,
well, I mean, the way I look at it is this: if you make it, if you build it, they will come, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, remember, gaming laptops for a while weren't really a thing, and then, now they really are a thing. There are people that swear by them. People will buy actually an Alienware laptop instead of a Dell because they want, even if they sacrifice a little bit in terms of size and weight, because they want that level of performance. I also know some tech journalists, especially videographers, video editors, and vloggers with a V, that are using gaming laptops for video editing because the performance is better.
Makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised if people that do development and do lots of C++ compiles and things.
Right, that too. Right. I mean, I know Razer, for example. The Razer Blade laptops are very popular with video editors and you're right, developers as well, because Visual Studio is primarily a Windows thing. Yeah, so I think maybe I'm not the target audience, even though my background is as a video game developer. But I'm keeping an eye on it because I think that it's interesting, and I feel like the fact that we now have Razer started it, then Xiaomi is jumping in, and Asus is rumored to jump in, and Computex is happening in Taipei very soon. Computex is the big PC show of the year. As you know, a lot of PC makers were based in Taiwan in the heyday of PCs. So Asus, being a Taiwanese company, will have a strong presence there, and I would be surprised if that gaming phone gets announced there. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm not sure I'm going to be in Taipei this year for Computex. I have in the past, so it's hit and miss every year whether I can make it. But so stay tuned on that. I think. Yeah, that's I think pretty much all the news we wanted to cover there, Dennis.
Okay.
which is exciting. We've made it.
Yeah.
So, is there? I want to know kind of. So you said you're using Galaxy S7 Edge. Is that your daily driver?
Yes.
All right. Any iPhones in the household for testing purposes, perhaps?
No. I've got an ancient iPad I used for watching movies on the airplane sometimes.
Ah, nice. And what if there was a phone you could, buy now, wanted to buy now? What do you think you would? What is the phone you'd be excited about?
Good question. I think I'd probably be excited about. Obviously, I like OnePlus, so this OnePlus 6 when it comes out, I'd be excited about that. I think
you should put you in touch with the OnePlus PR folks and see if they can get you one. I think it'd be good. You need something newer than a Galaxy S7 Edge, although that's a good phone. I wouldn't dismiss it.
It gets the job done.
Oh, for sure. Trying to think. In terms of prepaid, are you using prepaid as your main line, or are you on postpaid?
I am.
You are prepaid.
No postpaid.
What is your favorite right now? Is that the Red Rocket?
The Red Rocket, Red Pocket. I don't actually have a Red Pocket account. My account is on T-Mobile.
Oh, you're T-Mobile prepaid. I'm T-Mobile postpaid. Interesting. Cool. And you're happy with that?
Yeah, I am.
Cool. And they do offer unlimited data, you said?
They do. I don't have the unlimited, but it's available.
Is tethering included in prepaid, or do you have to buy that extra?
No, it's included in all of their prepaid plans.
Oh, that's cool. It's a very American thing that you'd have to pay for tethering extra. I mean, when I travel all over the world, I buy prepaid SIMs, and it's never metered or controlled in any way. It just works, right?
Right.
So obviously, a lot of my unlocked phones that I put my AT&T SIMs in and T-Mobile SIMs in just work as well. There's no control, but unfortunately, if you even buy a Pixel these days, which is my main phone, Pixel 2 XL is right now my main phone, you have they somehow know that it's a T-Mobile SIM, and they implement some sort of gateway there, and you have to have if you're postpaid, you have to have tethering enabled. Yeah. Which I think is on most accounts, but there's some limited amount of data by default, whereas I have unlimited, so it's nice. It's kind of annoying that way in the US.
It is.
But hey,
I hate it.
Me too. So, hey, Dennis, why don't you tell people where they can find you on the internet?
Okay. My main publishing platform is prepaidphonenews.com. And that's where we cover all the latest news on prepaid, keep on track, keep on top of all the new plans and changes to plans and carrier exclusive prepaid phones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I post there occasionally, and there's a contract writer that fills it up with stuff every day. And plus I maintain a series of set pieces, basically comparing and rating all the prepaid carriers. So you can find me there. I'm also on Twitter, where I'm at YesWap, YesWAP. And those are my main online presences. I don't do Facebook too much, but I do have a Dennis Bournique Facebook account if you want to look me up there.
Of course. Yeah. So now you know of a really great site to visit if you want to know the lowdown on all things prepaid. Really, seriously, to me, it's like my Bible. When I want prepaid news, sometimes I just ping Dennis directly in direct message. I'm like, Dennis, should I try this? What do you think? And he's super helpful. So I really appreciate all the advice you've given me over the years, and your wisdom and your experience is second to none in general in phones, but I think overall in this field. So thanks for being on the show. I do need to mention, of course, our awesome sponsor, Audible.com. Audible is really the place to go if you want to listen to audiobooks. They have the best selection. They have really great pricing, etc., etc. I think you should check it out. And to do that, we have a special offer that will, help the podcast along. Go visit audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And when you click there, you won't get a discount or anything, but you will support the podcast, and it'll let you subscribe and join Audible and check out what's going on. I've been kind of binging on early William Gibson novels recently, so that's been my thing. What would you be listening to in terms of a book right now that would tickle your fancy?
Well, I think I'd like to hear James Comey's new book.
Oh, yeah. That sounds really interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Indeed. wouldn't be surprised if that's on Audible. I'd have to Google it, but maybe I should check that out. Anyway, you know where to find me. I'm Tank Girl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL. Just like Tank Girl, the comic book, but without the vowels. And please subscribe to the podcast, mobiletechpodcast.com. We're also on Pocket Casts and on iTunes, so just search for us there. And check out my YouTube channel, Miriam Jouar. That's youtube.com/Miriam Jouar. My full name spelled out with a Y. And subscribe, like the videos and all that. Remember, the videos there are complimentary to this podcast. Dennis, thanks again for being on. Thanks Audible for being our sponsor. Thanks to World Podcasts for being the host of this show, at least on a technical level. And being my partner in crime in making this happen every week. Join us next week for another show. Thanks again, Dennis. I really appreciate you being here. Come back soon, okay?
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it was great talking to you today.
All right. Bye, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.